from the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast, Wednesday, February 7th, 2024. Thank you all for tuning in this morning. A busy show. We're going to get right into it. And again, I'm pre-recording the shows this week because I am traveling. I'm out on business. I'm in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. And so I'll be meeting some listeners and some viewers. I've met some yesterday. I'll be meeting some more today and tomorrow, and I'm really excited about that. Thank you for everyone who's come by and said hello. To get right into it, I didn't have time to even get myself a beverage this morning, getting the show ready and prepped for all of y'all. So you'll excuse me when I give you a coffee cup cheers without my own coffee. Tomorrow, I'll have a Celsius or a double espresso. I promise. That's kind of a thing at this point. But I do apologize. It's just been one of those mornings. So without further ado, coffee cup cheers, y'all. Let's get into the show. We've got a lot to talk about. We'll start off with security vendor Fortinet warning this week about two critical severity vulnerabilities in their FortiSIEM that could lead to a remote code execution. The CVEs 2024-23108 and 23109 have a provisional CVSS score of a perfect 10, and they can be exploited without authentication. Each of these bugs is described as an improper neutralization of special elements, and both appear linked to CVE 2023-34992 with a CVSS score of 9.8. That was patched in October of last year. Fortinet hasn't issued a separate advisory for the new flaws. Instead, they've merged them into the initial advisory, which suggests that they're either connected, a variation, or part of the a result of the original patch to fix that original CVE, that's CVE 2023-34992. Now, the improper neutralization of special elements used in an OS command vulnerability in FortiSIEM supervisor may allow a remote unauthenticated attacker to execute unauthorized commands via crafted API request. According to a NIST analysis, this is easily exploitable without user interaction, with high impact on availability, confidentiality, and integrity. It hits all three of the CIA triangle. The newly identified security holes are likely no different. Fortinet reveals that the bugs impact FortiSIEM versions 7.1.x, essentially X. For those who don't know, I was asked that yesterday in one of the show comments. It could be in any additional version beyond that. So 7.1 and whatever version from there, 7.0 point whatever version, 6.7 point whatever version, 6.6, 6.5, and 6.4 were all patches were included in FortiSIEM versions 7.1.2, but the security updates for the remaining vulnerable iterations are still pending. So there's that as well. So again, we're starting to see kind of this trend. Ivanti has really kind of held center stage for the last, about 45 days with multiple 0 days, multiple exploitables until CISA finally said, take this offline. Now, FortiSIEM, this isn't as bad, but it is a result, and it's a combination. It just shows you that security companies also need to address security just as seriously, if not even more, than the customers they're selling their security products to. And not to say Fortinet doesn't do that, but I'm not a customer, but by all purposes, from people that I've spoken with, even this morning, kind of talking about this story within some people within the industry, they've complimented Fortinet's response to this. So I just want to be very clear on that as well. There's that. A Chinese cyber espionage group breached the Dutch Ministry of Defense last year, deployed malware on several compromised devices, according to the Military Intelligence and Security Service of the Netherlands. However, despite backdooring the system, the damage of the breach was limited due to network segmentation. So we'll look at network segmentation now when we understand how critical it is for security practitioners to actually understand the idea of segmentation. Not only is segmentation effective, we saw with Schneider Electric, for example, in their ransomware attack, it only impacted one part of their business. Every single other part of their business is up and running and can support itself, while one part of the business is dealing with that ransomware attack, and we see the same here with the Dutch military. The effects of the intrusions were limited because the victim network was segmented from the wider MOD network. That's the report says the victim network had fewer than 50 users. Its purpose was predominantly R&D of unclassified projects and collaborations with 2 third-party research institutes that have all been notified of the incidents. The follow-up investigation, a previously unknown malware strain named CodeHanger, a remote access Trojan designed to infect FortiGate network security appliances, was also discovered on the breach network. Notably, CodeHanger's implant is persistent, recovering after every reboot by injecting a backup of itself in the process responsible for rebooting the system. So again, a very, very advanced way, and this goes into the investigation and into the persistence. Here's what we're seeing. We're seeing the persistence aspect of malware really become significant. We saw that with Microsoft. We've seen that with HP. And now we're seeing it here. The threat actors are getting very, very wise into what they're doing with the RATs and with the malware and so forth. They're putting it in, and they're putting it in the boot process. They're making it back up itself when you go to reboot, essentially thinking you're clearing out your system. When you're really not, it's just coming right back. Even a fully patched FortiGate device may therefore be infected if they were compromised before the last patch was applied. So there is a patch application here in order to get rid of that process altogether. The malware operates stealthy and persistently. It hides itself by intercepting system calls to avoid revealing its presence. It also persists through system reboots and firm upgrades. Folks, the Chinese have 300,000 or 400,000 people at this point that work an 8 to 5 job or an 8 to 8 job, because it's China and really they don't do 40-hour weeks. It's predominantly slave labor to the Chinese Communist Party. And all they're doing is building new forms of malware that helps them accomplish Chinese's military and espionage targets across the world. And so that's what they do. And at the event I'm at here for the Department of Energy, I can tell you, we hear a lot of people talk about China, a lot of people talking about China, but no one is calling out the elephant in the room. None of these organizations can deal with China independently or even together without the government putting a firm hand on China and saying, you keep doing this, we're going to start taxing you in all these different ways. So there's that. So CodeHanger is malware that was essentially deployed on a vulnerable FortiGate firewalls. That's CVE 2022-42475. That's the FortiOS SSL VPN vulnerability. We talked about it back in the show, but back in, I believe it was October of 2022 and January of 2023. So there's that as well. We see China on the move there. In other news, the Chicago Children's Hospital has been forced to take its network offline after an unspecified cyber attack, limiting access to medical records and hampering communication by phone or email since the middle of last week. This is Laurie's Children's Hospital, and it has all the hallmarks of a ransomware attack. The hospital initially described the issue Wednesday as a network outage. On Thursday, there was an official public statement saying they've taken their networks offline as part of a response to a cybersecurity manner. There's that. And so the records for a lot of these very ill children that are in that hospital have been held up. And, if there is scum is when you go after a children's hospital. Give yourself all of that. Verizon Communications on their end are warning about an insider data breach that is impacting almost half of their workforce, exposing sensitive employee information. Verizon, one of the largest telecoms, also known as Big Red, has over 150 million subscribers across the U.S. The company has around 117,000 workers. They do about $137 billion in annual revenue. A data breach shared with the main attorney general office reveals that a Verizon employee gained unauthorized access to a file containing sensitive employee information on September 21st of last year. Verizon discovered the breach on December 12th, nearly 3 months later, determined it contained sensitive information, including full name, physical address, social security number, national ID, gender, union affiliation, date of birth, and compensation information. It doesn't impact customer information, but it does impact employee information. And one can only tell what the impacts of something like this could happen. So there's that as well. Between November and December of last year, a threat actor successfully stole more than 2 million email addresses and other personal information from at least 65 different websites, according to Group IB. It was mainly relying on SQL injection attacks, according to the group, tracked as resume looters. Has been active since at least early 2023. They're selling the stolen information on Chinese-speaking hacking-themed Telegram groups. As part of the November-December campaign, the group primarily hit sites in India, Taiwan, Thailand, Vietnam, and China. However, it was also seen targeting victims in Australia, the Philippines, South Korea, Japan, the United States, Brazil, Russia, and Italy. They're focused on compromising retail and recruitment websites, but victims in the professional services, delivery, real estate, and investment sectors were also identified. The attacks resembled those launched by GambleForce, a threat actor relying on SQL injections to compromise gambling and government websites in APAC. The same as GambleForce, Resume Looters was seen using various open source tools and pen testing frameworks in its SQL injection attacks. The main difference, though, is that Resume Looters had also used cross-site scripting injections into legitimate job search websites meant to display phishing forms and harvest admin credentials. Through the injection of malicious SQL queries, the threat actor was able to retrieve a database containing close to 2.2 million rows, more than 500,000 of which represented user data from employment websites. So a lot of reasons to do that, one of which is to try and get to you through HR. JetBrains, on their end, are urging customers today to patch their TeamCity on-prem servers against a critical authentication bypass vulnerabilities that can let attackers take over vulnerable instances with admin privileges. CVE 2024-239017, a critical severity flaw impacts all versions of TeamCity on-prem from 2017.1 to 2023.11.2, and can be exploited in an RCE attack that doesn't require user interaction. They're strongly advising users to update their servers to 2023.11.3 to eliminate the vulnerability altogether. If your server is publicly accessible over the internet and you are unable to take one of the above mitigation steps immediately, they recommend to temporarily make it inaccessible until mitigation actions have been completed, meaning they're expecting potentially to see this be something that a foreign adversary might take advantage of. So keep that in mind and make sure you address that effectively. And an end of an era at Check Point and for the cybersecurity industry as a whole. Gil Shwed has revealed his intentions to finally step down as CEO of Check Point Software nearly 30 years after taking responsibility and founding the company. In the latest financial statements, Gil Shwed said it was the right time to focus on the evolution of the Israeli security vendor and its next stage, and that he intends to transition into the role of an executive chairman, charting the future of Check Point and the cybersecurity market. They've initiated the succession process to hire a new CEO, and once completed, he'll move into his new position as executive chairman. So there's that. Gil Shwed founded Check Point in 1993 with Marius Nacht and Shlomo Kramer, who are no longer with the company. Check Point's initial technology was built on the concept of stateful inspection. This became the foundation of the company's first core product, Firewall One. Their most recent activity was buying security service edge vendor Perimeter 81 in 2023, as well as everything they do in the Israeli startup security community. So there's that. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back with a whole lot more tomorrow. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day. I can't talk anymore. Have a great rest of your day. And most importantly, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.